Hello, I'm Jeff. This is the Seat 1A podcast, episode 011.
Hello, I'm Vinny. Welcome aboard. Let me show you to your seat, seat 1A.
Thank you for listening to us today. If this is the first time listening to this podcast, welcome aboard. If you're a returning listener, we're glad you're back. Seat 1A provides tips and tricks from more than 5 million miles worth of flying to help you have a more enjoyable flying experience.
In today's episode, recorded on January 27th, 2019, we're going to talk about, well, a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to talk about a social media launch. We're also going to talk about a story that was provided to us from one of our followers pretty much right away, and that surrounds airlines and hotel accommodation, compensation, the obligations they have, the obligations the passenger has, and the reality of how that all works. And then we'll take a bit of a deeper dive onto the airline side to kind of explain what they're sort of faced with and what they need to provide. And then we'll also kind of finish it up with some stories about, real life scenarios of where this is happening as we speak, and kind of go from there. So yeah, that's what
Excellent,
we're
yeah.
on.
And so yes, so there was a social media launch that you'd put out here today, and thank you everybody who's come in, said hello, liked our pages. We really appreciate it. Provided suggestions. It's fantastic and wonderful. And looking at the stats of the growth that's happening for a number of people who are listening since October, just increasing on a growing basis, and it's absolutely terrific. So thanks everybody for that. And I know Vinny, you've seen similar things.
Yeah, no, that today was just really cool. It kind of, it was nice to launch today in terms of the social media side of things. And for all our listeners and followers, we kind of held off for episode 10, 010. And the reason we did that is 010 is about us, Jeff and I, who we are, where we come from, our work experience, personal experience, and sort of who are these two guys doing this random podcast. So hopefully, for those of you that know us, it fills in a few blanks. For those of you that don't know us, hopefully you now know us a little bit more.
Fills in a bunch more blanks.
Absolutely. And thank you everyone for liking our page, and for sharing it with your networks. We're looking forward to continuing this on and seeing where this takes us. We don't necessarily know ourselves where this is going to take us. So if you have any suggestions, let us know. But there are many avenues to go. So in the tails of that, in the jet stream of that, one of our friends, Isabel Jackson in Washington, D.C., shout out to Isabel. Hi, Isabel. Quickly came on right away with our first story to follow up on. And that was one of the things we said. If you have a story or an experience that you kind of want to throw at us to dissect and sort of see where things are at, feel free. So she came right away.
So she had some story where she was stuck in that classic story of getting stuck at JFK. Is that right?
Oh, yes, yes. The
The
getting
movie
stuck at
lines.
JFK. Yeah, I mean, I've been stuck at JFK, LaGuardia twice, Frankfurt, Hong Kong, Paris. Where else? Where else? Where else? Toronto. And I mean, what about you? I'm sure you've been
I've
stuck there.
I've been stuck in Ottawa. I've been stuck in Heathrow. So between Gatwick and Heathrow, I've been stuck in Newark. And yeah, and I'm sure there's a couple others, like Frankfurt as well, that I got stuck, and even got stuck in Vancouver due to a standby ticket. So I've had my experiences as well.
Absolutely. So she had just listened to 009, and one of the main components in there was actually talking about you yourself, Jeff, getting stuck in Abbotsford, Canada, by Swoop. When we say stuck, that's a bit of a broad term, so let's narrow that one a bit. We're talking about a flight canceling or delaying, requiring extended time on ground, which therefore means hotel and meal and rebooking and all this kind of thing. So that's kind of what we're focusing on here today. So she just looked into that and basically said, yeah, I went through that a few years ago. And so this happened at JFK. Her husband and toddler were attempting to get on a flight by American, and it sounded like the delay was continuing on, and they were being rebooked and rebooked, and they had to get moved from gate to gate and possibly terminal to terminal. Very stressful when you have a
Have a
toddler. So
toddler in tow.
yeah, so any of you out there listening that have families or have had toddlers at one point before, I'm sure you can see where this is coming from. And point being, as whichever the last flight was, and this is around midnight, 1 a.m., it canceled. Fine. American was very good at rebooking them on the next available flight, which was in the morning at some point. And I'm sure that doesn't mean at a nice time of, 11 o'clock when you've had a chance to have your breakfast and have a nice long sleep. It was probably something like a 6, 7, 8 in the morning type of thing. So, rightfully so, they offered a hotel. But here's where the problem lies. For any of you that know the New York area and the layout of it, Jeff, JFK is located where again?
In Queens.
Okay. So
right on the bay.
Yeah. They were assigned a hotel in Long Island, which is not close.
I mean, JFK is on Long Island, but I mean, it sounds like it's another county over or outside of the boundaries of New York City that it was not anywhere close. I mean,
exactly.
And New York traffic at the best of times.
Yeah. Now, I think, when all of us, if this happens to us, we would all love to be able to be told, yes, we've booked you in the, Hilton or Marriott or Fairmont or whatever it may be, directly connected to the terminal just over there, ma'am or sir, and then off you go. Yeah, that usually doesn't happen so smoothly. Now, we'll add to the fact that this wasn't just affecting them and their flight. It was other flights and other things going on. So, they asked the airline, like, this is pretty much unacceptable because of the distance to travel just to get to the hotel. Well, the airline's like, that's the only rooms we can find. There are no other rooms available. So we'll come back to that whole prerogative in a bit. They went down to the airport shuttle load zone, and apparently it was just a mess. It was a gong show, and there were way too many people trying to get on the shuttle. And I mean, this is happening at 1 a.m. It's not like middle of the day when there's many one shuttle or other shuttles or bigger shuttles or plenty of taxis. The taxi rank was overloaded. So it was just on and on it went. Again, for those of you that have traveled through the American airports versus European or Asian ones, the shuttle buses are a bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they all work. They're all fine. They're all new. But they're kind of these, how do I describe it? Boxes on wheels. Not that a bus isn't a box on wheels, but they're these sort of standardized shuttle buses that you get on. You have to schlep your bags on, throw them on a rack, which doesn't hold enough of the baggage for the people. You bounce around. The entire thing is like, you think the screws are going to come out of the joints. There's probably sometimes a wheelchair rack, and they're making a heck of a racket. It's just, for some reason, not a pleasant experience versus going to...
And the ones I've seen, they're like the ones that go to like parquet or like rental car spots as well.
Exactly. They're all the same.
The same buses that are like small school buses in other locations.
There could be a school. It's pretty much exactly.
With the doors that sort of fold open when the driver opens manually.
Yes, and if it's middle of winter, those doors are you must just have the door open.
Yeah, and the bus is freezing cold in the middle of winter.
Yeah, and they have like old fans running from the ceiling, making
exactly.
It's dark. Probably a Ford Econoline front on it, or like a GM.
Exactly.
And it's just those two types, and there's nothing else. So anyway, and then the curbside, again, at any of the big American airports, is generally very busy. There's a lot happening. So they went down, they assessed the situation, they did a time calculation, which was very smart. So kudos on that. As to, okay, they fight to get on the shuttle in front of them, or maybe they wait for that shuttle to go and come back. By the time they would have made it to said hotel, checked in, gotten in, put the toddler to sleep, put themselves down, it was a long way away. It could have been like up to 2 hours into the future. To have some sort of sleep and then wake up and put the whole thing back in reverse, dealing with food. We wake up, you want to eat something, you need time for that, especially again with your toddler. It's not like you're just a single person, just grab a quick whatever it is from anywhere and eat as you're walking through, kind of thing.
But she would have been lucky if she's on an 8 a.m. flight and this is happening and she's doing whatever, getting in at 2:30. I mean, exactly. She'll be lucky if she got
3 hours,
3-4 hours if she was super lucky.
Exactly. So they opted to drop that plan and just, well, hang out at the airport, which is not a pleasant experience.
With a
And
toddler.
with a toddler. So in the end, they did that. They got on their scheduled book flight and they continued on. So that's how it went. Um, Afterwards, she actually took the time to write to American saying, this is what happened. It was not acceptable. Hotel in Long Island and whatnot. And then this is the best part, is she actually sent a photo of her with the toddler roughing it out in the airport
Oh,
uh,
wow.
as part of the letter. Fantastic. Absolutely
Yeah.
brilliant. Like, do you want to see how things went? This is how it went. Um, American actually responded quite well and offered a $900. I don't know if it was a travel credit or straight up cash, but in some sort of one of those temporary credit
Reimbursement.
cards.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Credit. Yeah.
for them to use, which she found acceptable as as it happened. So yeah, a lot went on there. One of the points she noted is that people were losing their mind, and she actually felt bad for the staff that were having to deal with it. And we have touched on this in a couple of different episodes of, you know, they're they have their hands tied. They're trying to provide what they can provide. There's no use just losing it on a staff member, albeit if they are being rude to you, that's a whole different matter. But in terms of the factual component of it in the process, you know, you got to treat them with some respect.
And you've been in this spot as a counter as a working at a counter, right?
Yes, absolutely. I've been on the other side of it as an agent, as a supervisor, calling the shots. So there's a few things that you kind of have to look at. So first of all, when a cancel now, let's back things up here. There's two different things that happen. There's a cancellation or delay. So we kind of need to define that. A cancellation means that that flight number, that aircraft is not going to operate. It's done. So today's January 27th. Flight 123 is canceled. There will never be flight 123 of January 27th, 2019 ever again. It's off the books. A delay means flight 123 of January 27th is going to fly at some point later. And that could be an hour later, it could be 24 hours later, it could be 48 hours later. But that flight number and everything, if it's operation, will continue. The equipment that was being used for it will continue on. A cancellation means that aircraft is now going to be slated for some other use, for some other flight. So these are two things that we sort of see. In the scheduled airline world, your mainline carriers, they generally cancel more than the delay because they have other flights operating on a set timetable that they can reaccommodate passengers on. But in the charter world, it's a much smaller fleet. They simply just delay the flight. If you're talking about something like going to Mexico to Cancun or something like that, and the flight only goes once a week, you don't cancel the flight because there is no other flight to put people on. You have to just simply delay and either fix the plane or wait for weather to subside or whatever it is. So yeah, these are the two kind of scenarios that we deal with. Now, in Isabel's story, it sounds like it was a canceled flight, so they were rebooked on the next available flight. So yeah, from the other side of the counter, very different story. The minute this gets notified to the staff, there's a massive scramble in a back office somewhere to find hotels. There are not just simply blocks of hotel rooms waiting for something like this to happen. The airline obviously has negotiated contracts with certain chains or particular locations, so they call up right away and say, "Okay, we need rooms." Um,
If you're lucky.
if you're lucky, they have 100 rooms, and that is just like a 5-minute drive away. Fantastic. But what a lot of hotels will do is promise, room recovery to a number of airlines. So, maybe United or Delta or American are all ready to go at that Holiday Inn Express at the airport. Well, if all three go into what do you call it? An irregular operation, well, first come, first serve, I guess, until the rooms
Whoever's
are filled.
quickest off the line to call that hotel.
Exactly. So, the airline going all the way out to Long Island, Sound
I
it's
mean,
not
we're
ideal.
talking like at least 10 miles.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely not ideal, but they are obligated to provide, we'll call it basics of shelter. Um, and that's how they had to do it. As a passenger, you don't have to take it. And these people were very smart to think about it and section it out. A lot of people just kind of go with the flow. They follow the pack, they go, they get on, they grumble, and it's only post fact that they realize, okay, well, maybe this wasn't necessarily the most ideal. Was it better than sleeping in an airport? Up to you and your scenario, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They probably would have received meal vouchers and whatnot, but then again, there we go. Here's meal vouchers to use where and when. Is there even anything open in the airport? Is another
And will there be something open at your hotel if you need to be back at the airport by 7?
good point. That's a really good point. Exactly. Are you going to make it in time?
Yeah. And
Um,
X 24-hour diner that's close to wherever you are, is it going to be able to take your voucher?
yeah. Yeah, you really have to start looking at fine print. And do you have time to be doing all this when you're like tired and stressed out and just annoyed with life and you're standing at a gate? Probably not. You're not thinking about
And
this.
you also having to worry about, her having a toddler, are you able to coordinate feeding your children and your toddler on top of yourself? I mean, it's bad enough if you're traveling as a solo when it happens, but having to coordinate, making sure your kids are all coordinated and able to go and able to move, and are they able to get out of the hotel and get up? I mean, that's an entirely different game that
Yeah,
you have to
family
deal with.
travel. Exactly. Yeah. And I remember working in this would have been in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. When we're getting into those wee hours of the night, your 1, 2 a.m., all the way through to like, the 6 a.m., there's generally only one thing open. And for Canadians that know it, Tim Hortons. Every Canadian airport pretty much has a Tim Hortons, which is a cafe. How would you describe Tim Hortons, Jeff?
Coffee and donut shop with
Coffee
a
and
little
donut shop.
more, with some other baked goods that people can have.
Yeah. So by the time if you rock up to a Tim Hortons at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., it's pretty slim pickings as to what's on that shelf because they're
Because their
busy.
their
They're very,
deliveries haven't come through for the next day.
yeah,
They're going to be there for another 4 hours.
yeah. So you'll either get like day old stuff or some really basic cold bun sort of thing. Yeah, I'm sure you can get coffee. That's all good. So, when these sort of cancellation and delays happen, yes, you have meal vouchers, but where are you going to use it? Well, here's a scenario where, yes, technically there is food. We're talking quality. So, um, now, moral of the story is that a lot of people will go through this. They will grumble, they will complain, they will cuss, they will get on their flight, they will get home and forget about it. And I guess we're going to defend the airline here for a second. What they will do is then say, oh, that airline was terrible. They did this. Okay, fine. But what a lot of people don't do is follow up afterwards and, get in touch with the airline and see if they can continue on to pursue compensation and whatnot. And that was very smart. Isabel, she did that, wrote into American, albeit with this photo of them roughing it, but it added to the effect. And basically said, look, this is what happened, in terms of the timing. Going to that hotel was not possible, especially with toddler, food situation, and whatnot. And look what happened. She got a $900 credit in return, which, doesn't necessarily smooth over the situation and make it better. No. But from the side of the airline, it shows that, you know, good things can happen if you take the time to document and write in. Now, had she found some other hotel and gone there, paid it with a credit card, and tried to submit that receipt, it'd be a flat out no, because there was one on offer, right? So you can't take it too far and start taking things into your own hands. You kind of have to ride that fine line of reasonability. So,
And even if there'd been bookings, say with like if she had travel insurance, either with like a credit card or separately, um, would they have necessarily qualified her for the refund of or the
mm,
credit for the hotel? I mean, it's tough to say given the fact, yeah, the airline gave you a shot to have a hotel. Are we obligated to provide you a different one and cover that cost.
Exactly. I mean, on a macro level, they did everything they were supposed to do. When you go down to micro level, they did everything they were supposed to do, but it was terribly inconvenient and non-realistic. So
Exactly.
this happens. It's probably happening right now as we're doing this recording. This is
Exactly.
happening day in, day out. People are going through this. There's some flight somewhere that just went belly up, and people are at a counter screaming at 1-2 agents. So what does that look like? Yes.
And then, some other passengers have moved on and they're screaming at some poor hotel representative trying to put them up and figure things out as best they can at 2 a.m.
Exactly. Now, one thing, I guess, it's all in hindsight. She could have maybe then potentially gone, asked for a supervisor and said, look, this is what the situation you're putting us in. I have a toddler and whatnot. Can you find me one room somewhere in the mix of the hotels that are around?
That are close to JFK, yeah.
Yeah. Could they have done that? Perhaps. Because now you're asking someone to search for one room versus 50. Much, much easier task. So, there's something to learn is take what you get, but then at the same time, if you have a special situation, you need to bring it to the attention of the airline, because the airline, they're just going through a list of passengers. They have the manifest, they have the your ticketing information, and they're just simply tossing out vouchers. They are not looking at who are you, what are you doing.
Yeah, it's match a name to a voucher and let's move and let's clear this list of manifests as quick as we can.
Yeah. So they are scrambling. So yeah, having worked on the other side, I've borne the brunt of a lot of people complaining and yelling, pumping their fists. Absolutely. And it's happened numerous occasions, and you deal with it. You instantly work on solutions. So again, in the hotel world, you're trying to find rooms. You trying to figure out the whole meal thing, and then there's the transport. Some airports, there are no shuttles to take people, so then you suddenly have to find a bus or something out in the middle of nowhere. So that is an interesting scenario as well.
I remember when I got delayed in Newark, it was pretty much all right. Everybody, go find a cab and see what you can find for a hotel somewhere. We were literally fending up for our own selves in the wild to try to find a spot.
Yeah. So you kind of, and this is, I guess, part of being an experienced traveler is value how much your sanity is versus the practicality of what's happening around you. If you are fine to spend X dollars and just parachute yourself out of a situation and walk over to that connected hotel and grab one last room that they have and never speak and just accept the cost and have an absolutely perfectly beautiful night, great. But not everyone has the liberty to do that. So yeah, I mean, there was one situation. It was a charter flight out of Edmonton. It was the middle of the day, and the thing went into a full 24-hour cancellation. 24-hour delay. Watch my words there. It was a delay. And I remember one passenger came up. He wasn't yelling, and he wasn't, being off-putting about it.
He wasn't being really rude about it, or
no, but he was very firm. He's like, I bought a vacation, a 1-week vacation, and for each day, when he's talking about you, he means the airline and the tour company and all that, and he had the whole paper in front of him, have been obligated to provide. Obligated, yeah. With meals and a hotel and entertainment and, I should be on a beach because this was going to Cancun or one of these hot spots. And I remember the station manager at the time handed so eloquently. She said, right, okay, I'm giving you a hotel, slipped him a hotel voucher. I'm giving you meals for you and your family, slipped him whatever the stack of meal vouchers were. And now I remember she said, and for entertainment, and you're supposed to be at a beach. They do have a pool with a water slide, so your family can enjoy the whole thing there for a night. But we will continue on with this tomorrow. And he basically said, you know what? You're right. You are providing, and there's nothing I can do at this point. So, and he took it, and he still, I'm sure, wasn't happy, but that's the reality of it.
Well, what smoothness to smooth that over.
Yeah, and we could do a whole different episode about the science of rebooking. I know you touched on it in 1 and 2, I believe, in terms of ticketing and flights and fares.
Exactly. Yeah.
And what does it take to rebook? You can't just simply magically put someone on someone else's plane. There's a whole back
And
end.
the costs involved, and is what's available versus how much it costs, and bunch of other things that are in play. So yeah, I think we'll definitely go back to that and touch it, because it's a lot of information on rebooking.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Yeah.
all
So
right. Yeah. So
there was something in the news you saw, right?
yeah. So there was there's been a few situations that are related to the I mean, there's always stories that come up for people getting stranded and things that go a little sideways, but we had a situation in Cancun with a WestJet flight, and so it was supposed to fly from from Cancun to Ottawa. And so what happened was WestJet told the people, okay, we're putting you up at a hotel in the middle of Cancun. And then the passengers apparently ended up in the middle of Cancun. They were put in shuttle buses to go to a hotel for the night, and they were informed that the transportation and accommodation would be provided. This is from a CBC article. And then when they arrived at the City Express Hotel in downtown Cancun, the person said the hotel staff were unaware that the tourists were coming in and asked for payment up front.
Wow.
And so the quote from the passenger said it's downtown Cancun, so it's not the tourist area that they were in. And a lot of passengers didn't have cell phones, and they didn't have money. So probably a lot of them were on package tours, so they were just going, getting everything paid for, and then many of them had small children with them as well.
Amazing. And yeah, in looking at that article, it doesn't quite go on. Like, I'd like to see where, I don't know, if maybe someone will continue posting on Flyer Talk on this one as to what actually happened. Like, did they get sorted out? Did the passengers go somewhere else? But yeah, so wow, okay. This is a good one.
And
Um,
this was on January the 8th, so I mean it's 3 weeks
2 weeks ago.
since it happened, so things should be hopefully all straightened out now by the airline and the passengers, or at least further along than when this occurred. And my gosh, that would totally
Yeah.
knock me out to be like, hey, here's my hotel, and no, we have no idea what you're talking about.
So a couple things that happen. And this actually applies to everything we've been talking about is the relationship of the airline and the ground handler. These are two different things. So in this article, they're talking about how the airline left them hung to dry. Okay, that's the general sort of statement. When you're at outstations, and we've talked about this before, airlines are handled by a ground handler. So you get a third-party company that will do your business for you, move your bags. They will fuel your plane. They will do your check-in. They are not actually employees of the airline per se. When we're talking like the largest cities and the big routes, that's a bit of a different. But we're talking, for the most part, a lot of airlines are ground handled, and the staff that are working will appear to be airline because they're wearing the uniform provided the airline. But at the end of the day, their shift and their paycheck is coming from a third-party company. And in the world, there's generally, your big ones are Swissport, Menzies. There was Service Air, and there's still a Service Air, and there's a whole bunch of others around. So again, and we kind of talked about this, how a hotel will have the obligation to provide, or an agreement to provide rooms for a number of airlines. That can also mean that the ground handler has sort of set up some billing with said hotel, but that ground handler can represent 2, 5, 10, 20, 30 airlines.
Especially in hotspots.
Especially in hotspots, exactly. So in this situation, it sounds like the ground handler is the one that set things up at City Express. And as the article mentioned, in most, I think 90% of tourist traffic going into Cancun is going to the hotel zone, this long strip of beach, man-made
Along
beach.
the beach, yeah.
That is Cancun. It's absolutely stunning. It's all tourist gear. The real city of Cancun is a completely different beast. It is just city. There's no beach. It's pure just life, civilization. So this sounds like this hotel was there, and yeah, there's probably not a heck of a lot going on there. So to arrive there and be told that there's nothing set up in terms of billing is interesting. So were they meant to have been sent with vouchers? Was something on the financial side not set up and they just simply sent them without verifying? Is an interesting scenario. So what does the passenger do in that sense? And you raise a good point. People probably don't have their phones in use because of high roaming fees. It's the end of the trip. They're going home. They probably spent any sort of last local currency they have,
Exactly.
or cash bills, because you're at the airport. You just bought your duty free. You're ready to go. Your next stop is home. So,
well, and I'm just looking at a Google map. I pulled up City Express Cancun, and it almost looks like American Drive in Orlando, where you've got the hotels and like a business strip. So there are some hotels along there, but it's definitely not like the tourist part of Cancun, because the hotel district is like the beach hotel district is a fair distance away. So
yeah.
So it seems like it was very much like a hotel strip rather than anything else, and totally I can understand how they felt that it was not very very friendly or conducive.
No kidding. I mean, if the bus drops you off or whatever it is, a taxi drops you off and that's gone, there goes your lifeline. And if you have no phone, so I guess you have two options in this scenario: either get a taxi of some sort or some sort of transport, go back to the airport and start all over again, and confront the airline, or B, take it upon yourself to just find said hotel and get yourself situated and then keep sorting it out. So not a great situation for these passengers at all.
Well, and the thing is, though, going back to the airport in the Cancun situation, is it's a 16-kilometer trip.
Exactly.
So, we're talking another 20 minutes, 30 minutes each way.
Yeah. And let's add to the fact, language issues.
Exactly.
Not a native Spanish speaker and whatnot. So, yeah, wow, that's woof, ouch,
ouch, yeah.
Yeah. So
turn around and book another week in the beach and tell your boss you're not coming back to work.
Yeah, exactly. So there was something else that was going on in the news.
Yeah, and so there was another one that happened. It was a situation in Goose Bay, Labrador. Now, Goose Bay is famous for, there's actually a very large Air Force base, and NATO training happens there. But there was passengers on United Airlines flight 179 from Newark to Hong Kong, and it got diverted 3.5 hours into the journey after a passenger fell ill. It landed at the Air Force base, and then the person was taken off the aircraft, and the plane was refueled. However, then there was a mechanical problem with one of the doors that meant the craft wasn't able to continue the journey, and then it couldn't be fixed, so they had to wait for people to come back. Now, this is Labrador in January, which, if you have stereotypical pictures of Canada in winter, this would definitely match it. It was minus 20 degrees Celsius outside. And so then they had to wait. And they got stranded for 16 hours.
Whoa. So this brings up a whole another type of disruption, and that is a diversion. So you're flying and you have to drop into some random spot en route. Due to a lot of them, it's usually due to a medical emergency. That's like a good chunk of them.
Or you also have like the passengers who lose it on the flight.
Absolutely. Air rage, security risk kind of stuff. Or you have a mechanical problem that's going on, and the plane does have to get onto the ground quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So fine. And again, as we're doing this recording, I'm sure there's a plane dropping into some city.
Somewhere,
yeah. So planes will arrive and they will land and they'll go there. So a lot happens. So if it's something like a medical emergency, they have to obviously deal with the passenger that's ill and move them along. And generally, if it's the severity of dropping into a city unexpectedly, that person's leaving an ambulance and they're gone.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Now, you don't just simply send the person along on their way in an ambulance, unfortunately. The next part that comes up is the baggage. You don't just continue on with the person's baggage. So now that baggage has to be pulled because now you don't have.
This goes back to episode 4, I think it was, when you were 4 or 5, when you were talking about baggage and
Yeah.
having to clear it all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, the path of the bag. And we'll tell a story about when I worked for Sunwing Airlines as a flight attendant. We were coming back. Actually, it was Cancun again, Cancun to Vancouver, I think it was. And somewhere over Denver, we had a gentleman who was having heart trouble. So that's pretty much an instant divert.
find your closest.
Yeah. Yeah. We were doing the onboard calling to the ground, talking to medical personnel and whatnot, and they recommended land now, get person off the plane. Okay, fine. So we landed in Denver, and this was called an overweight landing because generally when planes land at the destination, they are calculated to land in terms of the structural integrity of the plane with less fuel than when they took off. Well, when you land midway through flight, you still have a heck of a lot of fuel, so that puts an extra stress on the aircraft, the mechanics of it. So we're going to touch on that in a sec. We land, we get pulled off to a random pad into Denver, where this airline does not fly. Sunwing does not fly to Denver. So now a ground handler has to be sorted out. So this is what flight ops is doing once a declaration has been made to divert, is to find someone to assist this plane. So in this case, I believe it was Continental Airlines because it was right before the merger.
Okay.
Yeah. So the gentleman was taken off in an ambulance and with his family as well. Now you need to find the bag. This was quite late at night, and we weren't at the airport because we were an international flight, so we couldn't go to a gate. The people that had to search the bag was the first officer, captain, and myself.
Holy crap.
Yeah, so we got out of the plane, went into the hold, and had to go through all the bags in the pits, and we were looking for 5 bags. Of course, they were all black rollerboards, I'm sure, as it is.
Yeah. And this was like a 737 or like
737-800, fully loaded, 189 passengers. So we were talking
your
200 upwards bags. Yeah. And I mean, when you, as I'm sure you know, when you put bags into a plane, you don't just simply toss them in a pile, right?
No, you stack them to make them fit as best they can. And
yeah, so here we are literally ripping these beautiful Tetris stack of bags apart, trying to find this, monkeying around and we're in uniform as well. And that, yeah, it was quite a interesting thing. And we found the bags, pulled them off. Great. Next thing that had to happen is we have to get engineers and mechanics
okay, yeah,
to check the aircraft because we've done an overweight landing. So generally procedure dictates from the airline side is that if you do an overweight landing, you need an inspection because you're going to make sure things are fine. I won't get into the heavy mechanics of it, but you can imagine you do an
did you ruin your tires? Did you ruin whatever
braking systems, shocks, and struts? Yeah, exactly. After all this rigmarole, an hour and a half later, we take off and continue on. The one thing that was threatening this flight is something we talked about a few episodes ago as well. Crew timing.
Snow.
Crew timing.
Oh, crew time. Oh, of course. Yes.
Yeah.
Because you're waiting what couple hours, 3 hours. You're flying from Cancun to Denver is probably already 4 hours, 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're getting close, and you're pushing up against the limit if you're going to be able to get from Denver to Vancouver, right?
Exactly. I mean, in this scenario, that was our only flight of the day, so we were fine. We had plenty of time to continue on. But in many scenarios, that crew has done something else before, and suddenly you just add an extra couple hours into it, and it takes them offline.
Well, and when you mentioned Denver, I was concerned it was going to be snow.
Yeah, no, this was a decent time of year in terms of weather. So yeah, it was fine. So therefore, the plane continued on. Now, coming back to the United story and diversion, these are one of the things that can happen is these planes land in places that they're not supposed to land. And I believe this United one landed at an Air Force base.
Exactly. So Goose Bay is a combination Air Force base civilian, but predominantly Air Force base because it can handle general aviation aircraft only, according to Wikipedia, with no more than 15 passengers. So it does have people, but not ability to handle number of passengers that are coming from New York to Hong Kong.
Yeah, and that was probably I'm going to take a stab at it, maybe on a 777 or something of the sort. on that one. So thing is, yeah, this plane
you're
lands.
entirely right. Yeah, it's 777.
Okay, so this plane lands now. A few, it has to get fixed, a mechanical issue. Okay, fine. So that get fixed. Now a lot of you don't just simply like close the door and start the engines and go. Now you need more fuel because you've gone through the process of landing and you have to take off. That's quite a bit of fuel unaccounted for because everything's done to precision. So you have to get a fuel supplier. Okay. There's the whole billing side of things as well. It's fine if you can say, yes, there's a fuel supplier, but who's going to pay for the fuel and how is it going to get paid for?
Well, we touched about it in other episodes where there was fuel issues and pilots have had to ask passengers for cash to pay for the fuel.
Exactly. Now, again, with most big airlines, they can get this sorted out fairly quickly because, again, in the fueling world, most places are universal companies, big corporations. But when you go to smaller places, private independent fuel supplier needs payment. So that's one thing.
Now, with like smaller locations, and say the type of Jet A1 that's required, would they have like enough for a large plane, or would they have, say, a lower grade fuel because jets don't normally land there? They've got like other aviation fuel, but not, say, like the high grade
exactly
Jet A1 available for them.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a concern that comes up. Assuming you can get that sorted out. What else is there? Let's see. Oh, so okay. So at this point, the flight should be able to continue on. What's going to not let it go on is most likely something like a crew issue or the mechanical issues, so much so that the plane cannot fly. At this point now, the flight is declared as fully diverted and delayed, canceled, whatever it may be. So you have all these passengers on a plane that need to go somewhere. So who gets to deal with it? Well, if there's a ground handler, that's great. And I could continue on just telling stories of planes that have diverted into where I was working and how we dealt with it, but we can save those tales. We'll continue on with this one. You have to find accommodation for these people. And, can you feed them? Are there even restaurants? Where are you? If you're at sort of an Air Force base, you can't just take 300 people and say, here, feed these people. That's not going to work. Are there even...
At least you've got a mess hall, but still, it's an incredible amount of logistics.
Exactly. If you have 300 people, hotel rooms, let's say, assuming there's couples and families, you can cut these numbers down. We're talking like still 150 plus rooms most likely required. And if you land in smaller places,
good luck.
Good luck. Exactly. So what's the solution here? From the airline side, they're going to send another aircraft. And again, they can't just materialize it and just send it. You have to find a crew. You have to get the right aircraft type. When you're dealing with long haul, not every aircraft can fly on every route. There's different ratings and legal restrictions. So that all has to be done. The flight planning, quite a lot of work has to be done to get a recovery aircraft in. So I can see how this got embroiled and the passengers ended up sitting on that plane for that long. How the crew handled it, serving the meals, and when they did, sounds like it probably came a bit too late in the situation, but we weren't in the situation, so who knows? A lot going on with that. So, if you find yourself in these situations where out of the middle of nowhere, you end up in a diversion and the plane can't go on. These are things that, hopefully by listening to this, it'll help you understand sort of where things are coming from. So that you can either use it to your advantage or just help the situation by knowing what's going on, knowing what you have the right task for. Because they do have the obligation to, give you shelter and food and a warm place to be. But all too often we hear these stories where that kind of gets missed.
Well, and the shelter and the warm place to be in small locations might just end up being inside the airplane.
Yeah, exactly. And there is food. I mean, all those meals needed to have been served at some point, so that does happen. It's just frustrating when you're not moving anywhere and getting to where you need to be. And I think in this case, they sent the recovery aircraft and brought them back.
Yeah, rather than continuing on. And I think that's
yeah. So at the end of this whole ordeal, you haven't even gotten out of where you were leaving from. So this is a whole world of passenger compensation, and as we all know, the EU has moved forward quite a bit in passenger compensation, and Canada also just started up a system as well. So
Yeah, so it's difficult, and I know sometimes with the compensation, there are airlines that are doing things, not necessarily fly carrier, sometimes smaller ones that are trying to get out of doing the things, trying to find a way to do it. There was a case in the UK, or flight to the UK, with people sitting on the floor or something, as they were trying to get people rather than giving them compensation. But there are brokers and people who do this for a living. So if people aren't wanting to do all of the compensation in themselves, there are different companies out there that you can file with and say, okay, can you help me out with my claim? And then that particular company takes a percentage of whatever refund you get.
that's right. That's right. I guess the main point we're trying to make here is that don't expect magic to happen in the snap of your fingers when it comes to delays, cancellations, and diversions. Like, try to be as realistic as you can, but also keep an eye and make sure that they are doing as much as they can given the situation. A scenario just came to memory. Working in Edmonton, it was the middle of the day, and there was bad weather in, I want to say it was Calgary. So an American Airlines MD-80 that was still flying ended up diverting to Edmonton. They were not able to continue the flight. Could have been due to crew duty time. I can't remember exactly, but fine. They sorted out the hotels. That we got that all done. That was quick. Now we're left with the plane. So the plane was just simply pushed back off the pad to a parking spot, and that was it. Fine. Next day, plane is set to go. Passengers show up to check in, deal with all that. We get them all sorted out. But the actual plane itself, a couple of things had to happen. And one thing we didn't actually talk about is the whole customs clearance.
Customs clearance, yeah.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in 1 second. So any flight going to the US, first flight of the day requires a full, complete security inspection. And this means you're tearing up the seat cushions, you're inspecting it, everything, all has to be done and certified for that plane to fly. And you sign a declaration that that has been done. So that wasn't done. And so we had to sort that out all of a sudden. The plane was not cleaned overnight. It doesn't just happen like that. We just close the door because we were not instructed. We were kind of following instruction because, again, everything costs money. So, yeah. So, the crew shows up, they get on, and they were like, oh, great. All the food and drink and everything, all their ice, it was all just there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Not dealt with. So, their next flight to Calgary was, a half-hour flight. So it was no big deal. It's not like they were going to do much on it.
Mm-hmm.
But from a passenger experience, you can imagine getting on this plane being the same way that you left it after a night in a hotel. It just adds to the whole
aggravation.
The aggravation, yeah. But there's not much time to sort some things out.
So U.S. flights, even if they were like going Canadian, because it's a U.S. airline, you had to provide that certification.
And even Canadian Airlines, all carriers, first flight of the day into a U.S. destination.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, get a U.S. security search, and there's a particular standard that has to be followed. So,
Wow.
so yeah. Speaking of customs, going back to this whole diversion thing, if you are on a flight and it diverts, sometimes you can't go anywhere because the people can't be dealt with. You can't just simply just say, okay, we found all these hotels, you can go and be amuck in the place that you're at, because customs needs to clearly, immigration wise and customs wise. So I think in the Goose Bay situation,
they didn't have the customs people were done for the day, and there wasn't any staff available to process anybody anyway.
Exactly.
And what happens in a case if it's like somebody's on a flight, but they're not able to clear customs into the country?
Right. That's huge, especially if you think about this flight, Newark to Hong Kong. People may have needed visas to enter Canada. That's not going to happen. So what happens to those people? And that's a very good question. They kind of fall into like this gray zone. And that's where the airline needs to look. They look at their manifest, they look at their, it's called APIS data, which is Advanced Passenger Information System. And they see the what do you call it, the passport details, and they can make a judgment call saying, you know what, 75% of this plane can't even enter the country, so we're not going to let them off because what else are we going to do with them? And that's how things develop into these like horror stories of like, you know, multi-hour delays.
Like that guy that got
trapped on a
stuck in
plane.
Paris for years.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Or Tom Hanks in
exactly.
the terminal. So yeah. So anyway, sucks, but that hopefully will give you all a better understanding of how the inner workings of it are. I mean, there's no good side, bad side, good cop, bad cop. Is just it's the situation that you kind of have to roll through. So hopefully listening to this, it kind of gives you a few tips to sort of stay ahead of it and think ahead and sort of understand what's going on. So it eases it up, no matter where you are and what you're doing.
Absolutely. And yeah, so there's all sorts of crazy things that learning about what happens when diversions happen and all of the necessary uh, logistics that you don't think about as a passenger, but has to happen in the background. And appreciate all of that, and appreciate also Isabel sharing her story and allowing us to know what was going on, and inviting people to share their stories with us. Let us know on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We've got options for you as well. So we look forward to hearing from you. We're doing this one a little bit different. We're doing it as a video part here, just getting it out right away. Then we'll clean up the audio and have an actual full episode out on audio later this week. But I do want to thank everybody again for sharing. And if you like this episode, rate us and subscribe, and keep telling your friends and fellow travelers about us. And make sure you visit us at seat1a.org/011 for complete show notes. Vinny and I are working on the website, so if it's not fully up and there yet, we're working on it. We're getting it done as quickly as we can. And that's Sierra Echo Alpha Tango, the number 1, alpha.org.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening. And like we said at the beginning, we do this based a lot on follower feedback, and we want to hear all your stories and your, situations you've been in. So please let us know and shout out to us. And we do have a couple new email addresses. I believe we have stories@seat1a.org.
Exactly. So yeah, feel free to write to us there and let us know what's going on. And until the next time, I'm Geoff.
And I'm Vinny. This is Seat 1A, the podcast. Have a great flight.